Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Islamic Vibes podcast. I'm your host Majid, and today I'm joined by my hosts Rash and brother Ishti. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. How you doing?
Wa alaikum salam. All good, bro. How about yourself?
Alhamdulillah, bro. It's been so long that I almost
Forgot.
forgot forgot my opening lines. You know what I mean? But it's good to have you guys on. As you know, it's been ages since Ramadan was the last time we recorded
Was
an
it
episode.
really? Okay.
Yeah. So obviously with Eid coming up, it's been over 2 months.
Nah, it can't have been that long. Okay. All right. I'll take your word for it, but I didn't
No,
realize
it
it was
has.
that long. Okay.
It has. Ishi knows. He's nodding with approval there.
Okay.
How you doing, Ishi?
Alhamdulillah, good.
Everything good, yeah?
Alhamdulillah.
That's good, man. That's good. So that's why, we have to restart, bro. We have to restart, and I do apologize for, the people who subscribe to the podcast, whether it's via YouTube or the podcast platforms. They must have been thinking these guys have retired. Like many podcasts, you do get a lot of podcasts who get to a certain amount of episodes, and then they kind of run out of steam. And hopefully, inshallah, that doesn't happen. As long as there's a demand, and hopefully we will supply the episodes.
Inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. But yeah, you know what? Since we've been away, lots happened, and obviously we can't cover everything. But I think it's worth just having a quick chat about the main discussion at the moment that everyone's speaking about, whether it's your elders or whether it's kids, about the Titanic submarine, and what happened to it, because obviously, as you know, the last week or so, it was sort of plastered on the news every day, even though now reports are coming out that the Americans really knew days and days ago that it had imploded. However, it didn't stop people from going out and trying to look for it. But I think what's more interesting, and I've seen this not just from Muslims, but also from a lot of non-Muslims who have been trying to compare the coverage and the treatment of, just say, the 5 or 6 people in the little submarine, compared to the horrific incident of a few weeks ago when a boat capsized. I think about 700 people on board. I think the numbers are maybe around 600 dead, including many children, hundreds of children, I think, and women and stuff. And even a few days ago, there was, I think it's Canary Islands, there was another boat that, like a dinghy, that sank, I think killing all the people on board. Even though I think it was the Spanish Coast Guard they were around an hour away from when the distress call was made, but they didn't do anything. And 10 hours later or something, they drowned. So a lot of people are talking about this and showing the double standards or hypocrisy, as you may call it. But just as an opener, really, if you guys have any thoughts on this, if you've been chatting to people about it or not.
I've heard that angle a lot, and it's correct. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely, when you get certain stories, mainstream media, they'll cover what's within their interest, isn't it? And it's within their interest to push this in particular. This, it caught the imagination of the people and that kind of stuff. So, and it's that kind of story, isn't it? It's like billionaires. There's only so many in the world, all that kind of stuff. So, whilst I agree there's hypocrisy in the coverage, the other way I looked at it is that, the fact that, people are dying all of the time in these refugees traveling, trying to get to other lands where there's war and stuff. I think sometimes what it is because that's happening so frequently, if they just keep putting that in the media constantly, people have been desensitized to it. It's just the same as Palestine. Our brothers and sisters are being bombed and killed and shot all of the time. It's horrific every single time. But when it's happening every single day, as a Muslim, even as a Muslim, you can get desensitized to it. So I think there's that element of, yes, it's hypocrisy. They definitely didn't give the other events that merit more response. the same amount of coverage, but at the same time, this is a relatively unique incident, and that's why it got more of the coverage, as much as it is the hypocrisy, and which I agree with. So there is that element, but I rather look at it from the point of view of, just from an Islamic perspective, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us is that death can come anytime. You can be in lofty towers, you can have billions, you can have all of the you can spend £250,000 to go down to the bottom of the sea, but you are not more powerful than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When your time is come, it will come. That was the main message for me, really. And no amount of money could save them. They didn't go down there as a suicide mission. They were expecting to come back, but little did they know their time was up, and that just happened to be the way that their life ended. Mainstream media just took advantage of it, really, more than anything else. And in regards quickly to what America already knowing, again, might sound a bit conspiracy theory. There's always stuff to cover up. There's all this stuff about Hunter Biden and the Bidens and stuff, dodgy stuff that they're doing. All of that stuff was coming out at this time. So it was a relatively convenient for there to be wall-to-wall coverage, hour by hour. This is what's happening now. There's 1 hour worth of oxygen. There's 50 minutes worth of oxygen. They can hear knocking sounds and all of this kind of stuff. Where did all that come from? If the implosion happened a couple of hours after the submarine went down. So yeah, I'd like to know more, but a lot of things are going to get covered up, isn't it? So yeah, those are a couple of my thoughts more than anything else.
Yeah, no, that's some good thoughts, especially the one about death. If it's written that you're going to die at the bottom of the ocean, you just need to get there, don't you?
Exactly.
But they were there, you know what I mean? Ishti, any thoughts, man?
From my point of view, I was the thing is, with refugees, they're seen as problems. And, we have become desensitized, but at the end of the day, there's someone we have to help and give resources to, whereas these are contributors, if you want to say. And that's how they're seen as, like, we've lost out with these billionaires and these rich people who've decided to take this little mission and all this kind of stuff. But, even the way that the French dealt with it, someone asked for a minute's silence for the 700 victims of this refugee crisis, and the lawmakers said no. And we're talking just about 1 minute of silence for all these people and how they were dealt with, and this is the world we unfortunately live in.
Yeah, I think this also really does show the ugly face of nationalism, patriotism, because what you're talking about here is you're talking about people being viewed not as human beings, but based on their ethnicity, based on their the beliefs they carry. So when the Coast Guard kind of turns up, they're not seeing human beings, and it's fantastic what Ishti just said. They're seeing a problem. Yeah, they're seeing a problem. Whilst actually, according to the maritime law, if that's what you call it, if anyone's in distress in the ocean, on the seas, you have to rescue them. And this has been going on for centuries. So what you're seeing here is with nationalism, people are being judged along superficial lines, and people are getting a good night's sleep, even though they witness people falling into the ocean in front of them, And so we can see that nationalism isn't just a big problem that's, that was exported into the Muslim lands. It's a big problem, even wherever it is. And it really takes that human element out of people. And we're seeing this now, and things like Brexit and all these other sort of like the rise of far-right governments and stuff like that, whether it's the VOX in Spain and in France and stuff like this. This is a result. And remember, nationalism breeds racism. Yeah. It's inevitable. Yeah, it's inevitable.
I agree with you, definitely. And that, because people see it as a problem, then, there comes a point where they can become more desensitized, and there's that element of, their lives are not worth the same as the life of someone in the West. So there's definitely that bit. But you know what? There's another angle as well, because even mainstream media promoting something in a certain way, you can see that it has so much power. So, and again, certain stories, certainly, you know, what they do is like, you know, even with the Ukraine war and stuff like that, you know, when they start to go down to the place, show the women, show the children, interview them, show their difficulty, then people naturally, why did people start waving Ukrainian flags and stuff like that in this country? Obviously, because they show a certain side of the story. So, you know, when you go down to the emotional level, then it's natural that people link to that. So even this event, even the, you know, they were showing the father and the son. A lot of people who were talking about the submarines and stuff were talking about the father and the son, because it tries to put you, the mainstream media or the media in general tries to put the situation linked to your life. So you suddenly think that could be me and my son. So, you know, when there's a word for it and you might think of it, I can't think of it right now, but when you humanize the things to a really personal level, then you appreciate him. And, you know, remember, was it last year or a few years ago when those boys were stuck in the cave? Where was that in?
Thailand or something.
Thailand, yeah. Oh, yeah, I think so. I'm not sure. I can't remember now. I've watched the documentary and I can't remember. But, well, you know, even that, why was it so powerful? Because people think, imagine that was my son. Imagine those were my children. How would I deal with it? So this is what mainstream media has, this power to do this. But what does it do? It uses that power for its benefit when it's their billionaires or when it's their headlines or when it's the Ukrainians, but it doesn't do it for Palestinians. It doesn't do it for Iraqis. It doesn't do it for Syrians. Okay, when they wanted a certain outcome, then they started doing it. So they started zooming in on Syria when they wanted to, you know, push a certain narrative or a certain side. So my other point is that you can see just how powerful it is, but imagine it was used for a force of good. If we use for good, then imagine how much better it would be. And if you push truth, you know, rather than a political agenda or propaganda machine, a lot of these are propaganda machines. If you used it for genuine truth and good and promoting the right things, then you would be able to transform society. But unfortunately, that's not all of these media channels, or many of them, fall into that bracket of they're controlled by their governments, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly, bro. Exactly. And that's the thing. A classic example is, you know, the Taliban at one stage were the brave mujahideen of Afghanistan, and then they became the terrorists. And I think that's really, really good how you actually you put that even when there is coverage over issues that affect Muslims and it might be seen in a positive way, always try to read between the lines, because there's a reason why they would be doing that. And it's going to be something that serves them, not the people that are being persecuted and whatever. Yes, Ish.
I was just going to say, you just mentioned families, and someone mentioned that from one family in Pakistan, 40 cousins and stuff passed away on that boat. And it's important for us to realize and make the dua for them that they've suffered a lot, make it easy for them and their families. Because it's obviously a difficult time, whether you're a billionaire, whether you're poor, whatever. Everyone's got hopes, everyone's got ambitions. May Allah make it easy for them and their families.
Ameen.
And that's the thing, bro, because look, what you got to understand is, you know, what we're seeing now is there's been a media frenzy over the last few years where anyone who's like an economic migrant is seen as someone who is like a, you know, future rapist. He's like a cockroach, and he's like this. But throughout history, and this is why I was talking about nationalism, why there's an ugly face of it, because throughout history, people moved around. People moved around to better their life. Now it's seen as such a negative thing. In fact, if you look at Britain, it was built off its rape of India, right? Some people argue that even the colonialism, and especially what happened in India, a lot of it actually funded the actual industrial revolution. So all the progress you see is on the backbone of people suffering, right? But let's just give them the argument they wanted to do something which was for the betterment of their society, their people, their lives. They wanted a better life. They were fed up eating spotted dick all the time, and they wanted to eat curries. You know what I mean, right? Let's just say it was that. Okay. But here now you have people who are taking a dangerous journey And you know what? It's not because they want to be living in skyscrapers or they want a Bugatti or stuff like that. We're from those lands. We've seen, when we go back, we've seen the poverty. So when people take those steps, right, they're taking it because they want to do it not just for the betterment of their own lives, to, you know, make life better for family back home, wherever it is. That's the thing, but it's seen as something which is ugly. But when you got expats and you got all these people that are living all over the world, right, that's okay. But if you've got a poor person who's got no future because of actually the war on Islam or war on terrorism, whatever you want to call it, the whole infrastructure, the country, there's no future there, and people want to leave to make a better life, and the only way they can do it is by taking dangerous routes across oceans and across mountains and all this sort of stuff, right? Somehow they label as cockroaches. And I think that's the thing. So when you're seeing videos, and I saw videos where, you know, the boat's upside down and you got these two young guys, and to be honest with you, they look like Pakistanis, if I'm honest with you, but they could have been anyone like from Middle East. And you know, they're on there, and whenever there's waves coming, they hug each other, then they, you know, they're trying to find. I'm thinking, imagine being in that place where you look around you, all you see is ocean. How terrifying. How terrifying must that be? It's really scary, and that's why Rash is right. When you start putting yourself in that position, maybe then you will empathize with people. But the way the media does it, it will make you empathize with Ukrainians, with other people, but not with these people because of that coverage. And that's how important, that's how powerful the media is. But inshallah, let's move on quickly. And I want to have a discussion about Hajj, any sort of lessons we can take from this, because, you know, we're in the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, the blessed days, and, you know, we have Hajj coming up, and I think, if I'm correct, both of you guys have been on Hajj, right?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah.
Hajjis, yeah. So we've got 3 Hajjis here, yeah. Alhamdulillah, may Allah accept it.
Alhamdulillah.
And the in the mosque now, generally what we will see is in the khutbahs and stuff like that, there will be a lot of discussions about Ibrahim alayhi salam, about, you know, the sort of struggles that he went through, and mostly about the sacrifice. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Ibrahim alayhi salam to sacrifice Ismail alayhi salam. And obviously from this, you know, people talk about the udhiyah, the qurbani and stuff like this. Now, Ish, you know, obviously we've been discussing this for a while now, and I know that without throwing you into it, you know, we've been having some good discussions in regards to some of the lessons that we can take from things like sacrifice and qurbani. And I think sometimes what happens is we listen to these khutbahs and we kind of like limit the lessons into maybe the sacrifice being linked to just doing your qurbani and getting the reward of every hair of the animal and so on. But as you know, we've discussed, there's a lot more lessons that we can take from this, right? So what's your thoughts? Because I know, you know, you want to bring forward some of the examples which we can discuss, inshallah.
I think the first thing that we've got to look at is, you know, the story. When we talk about the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, you think about him, how many times is mentioned in the Quran? Some say, you know, it's up to 75 instances within 25 chapters. So he's a very serious part of Islam. And, you know, when they describe him, the scholars, they call him the Ulu al-Azm. He's from the greatest of the prophets. And he's considered second to the Prophet ﷺ, right? So he has a very, very serious station in Islam. And in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in him there's an example, right? In Ibrahim alayhi salam. So we have to look at this in a very serious way, because sometimes I feel like when we talk about the stories of the prophets, it's a story and then we do the rituals, but there's no connection. It doesn't mean anything. There's nothing in between. Or this is the story of the sacrifice. Ibrahim alayhi salam sacrificed his son, and then we do something similar, but there's no connection. There's no understanding. And I think that's why we have to bring the Quran alive by understanding and contemplating why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a small book decided to put these stories in. There must be immense value in them. So I think that's where we should start, because we have to reflect on why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions these great people. And I think, like you said, the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam is sacrifice. But often we heard the term sacrifice, but his sacrifice is in the right manner. And I think that's where we should start sort of reflecting. So I was just going to say, so in terms of Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was actually born in Babylon. He was from the land of where the people, they call them Chaldeans. Now, I don't know what, it would be effectively modern day Iraq.
Mesopotamia.
Mesopotamia, yeah. And one of the things that I find interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, and this will flavor everything going forward in terms of the characteristics of Ibrahim alayhi salam, in that he said that he at a young age he'd given him wisdom, and he made him of the righteous. And they say, and when you look at the tafsir and the explanations of this, they say he was given intelligence and understanding. So the reason why I start with this, we'll see this in the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam. When when you hear of other prophets, it just says this happened, this happened, this happened. Whereas Ibrahim alayhi salam actually almost gives you his thought process, his understanding, and that's very, very important. So like all people, where do you start off if you're on a mission? You talk to your family, you talk to the nearest of kin. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in quite a few instances in the Quran, he talks about the conversations between himself and his father, Azir, right? That's what he is called in the Quran, and the Mufassir have said, using the Quran, that's his name. Now, something to give you a bit of an idea of these people is they used to worship idols, and Azir, his father, used to carve them. He used to carve them out of stone and wood. So it's kind of a funny situation where he would carve them himself, sell them, and then people would go worship them. So Ibrahim alayhi salam saw this. And what did I say? He was a man of intelligence. So he's like, wait a minute. I saw you make them. I see you sell them, and then people are worshipping them. So he sees the whole process, and he's thinking this makes absolutely no sense. So
this is, just for the benefit of the listeners, this is here we're talking about before prophecy, right? Because here you're talking about a young child when he was young, and so here this is a rational thought process. Like you're saying, he's seeing, something being carved by material material by someone's hands, being sold for profit, and then people are worshipping it. It's like
so in some tafsir and explanations of the Quran, they say he was as young as 16. He was a teenager, more.
Okay, not that. Okay.
He was very young at this point, right? And so he's very, very young, and he's later described as being a young man or a young boy. And this is mentioned in, for example, the 26th chapter of the Quran. And he would question, what is it you worship beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So he said this to his father and his people. And they replies, we worship idols to which we are fully devoted. They're actually, so what they would do is they would ask the idols for sustenance, for some guidance, and all this kind of stuff, even though he'd see them doing all these sort of things. So what does Ibrahim alayhi salam? He says, can they actually hear you when they call upon them? Or are they just essentially like ears that you've carved yourself that have no sort of connective, they've got no connected organs? Or can they benefit you or harm you? And they realize that he's saying the correct thing. So what do they say? No, but we found our forefathers doing the same. They can't give a good response, so they give the only response they have. We just followed our previous predecessors, and we're just doing the same thing. So Ibrahim said, have you really considered what you've been worshipping, you and your ancestors? So is this an inherited belief, but is this an actual thought out process? And then Ibrahim alayhi salam says, they're all enemies except the lords of all the worlds. So he came to understand at a very, very young age by reflecting that, these beliefs are absurd. Even today, we hear people doing this very, very similar sort of things. Oh, I believe it because, it's normal in society. We hear of this gender battle in society, or we've got to be tolerant, we've got to be this, that, the other. Whereas biology, which is factual, which we can appreciate, is saying the exact opposite. So inherited beliefs, whether it be from your forefathers or from society, are incorrect. You have to have a reflection and understand what you're actually talking about. So I think it's a very, very sort of important point, and he's a very, very young man. And what I find interesting about Ibrahim alayhi salam, he doesn't just go and attack them. He actually guides them through a process repeatedly.
Yeah, one just kind of to interject where you can carry on, is that what's interesting is, you said he was given intelligence. Sometimes people don't appreciate, like, especially when the Quran tells us and the Hadith tells us that, he looked at the sun and he looked at the moon. It comes across as if, he's like going, oh, I'm going to worship, let's worship the sun one day. And then suddenly the sun says, oh, I'm not going, the sun can't be God. But it comes across very primitive in thinking, but that's not the point. It's what you're saying. It's the thought process. The fact that he was given intellect, and that means, and he was the most intelligent, it means that the simple examples are for us to realize there's a journey. You look at those things, you look at the sun, you look at the moon, you look at these idols, you look at their limitations, you look at the fact that something else is controlling them, and you'll come to Tawheed. And I think that's where you're kind of going, isn't it? Is that it's not just about, some of the simplistic ways of looking at it. He was intelligent, but he was taking his people through a journey.
What's so interesting about that story? It comes slightly down the line, but since you've mentioned it, in essence, these people that he went to later on, these weren't his actual people. So he was migrating in this process. He stopped. It's called in a place of Haran. And these people worship stars. So he's actually changed his style a bit, right?
Yeah.
So rather than attacking, so Ibrahim is also described as being gentle. Like he's not like a harsh. Ibrahim, Musa alayhi salam is said to be like harsher in his tone, right? You've got to believe, or this, that, the other. Whereas he would stand and he would go through with the people. So these guys used to get out and they used to look at the stars. Now, in every tafsir that I read, alleged, I didn't know this. The first star after the sun sets isn't a star; it's Venus. Right? It's actually a planet, which kind of surprised me. I didn't know that. Anyway, so he looks at Venus first. He looks at the first stars because it's first, and then it sets. And he's like, he even says, I don't like stars that set. So how can I follow it? So next day he comes out, but he comes out with the people, right? He's firm in his beliefs. He comes out with the people, and what's the biggest and brightest thing in the sky? Well, in the night sky, it's the moon. So he goes, I'm going to follow this. But guess what? That sets as well. But you see the process. He's
taking his people through the journey.
Exactly. So he's bringing people up, but he's also explaining that these things are limited. They can't escape these things. How can this be the characteristics of a creator, of our Lord, something that you owe submission to?
Because it's bound by a particular rhythm. It can't do anything other than what it's been designed to do.
Exactly. And he makes people reflect on nature and what we do. And this is something that as Muslims, we should do as well, because it makes you understand that relationship and reminds you that who's the creator and his attributes. And this is what we got to understand. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he's in many places, he's the one that named us Muslims, right? But it's all about submission and submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through understanding and giving him a complete submission. And in a way, he is like a prophet of all prophets of Tawheed, but he's like almost a symbol, emblematic of this idea. So there's quite a few variants of this story, but the story early on when he was talking to his people. And what's interesting, when he was talking, he actually explains what the qualities of what should be worshipped. He understands. He says, he is one who created me, and he alone guides me. He's the one who provides me with food and drink. So he understands that he's the one that gives him sustenance. He's the one that can only guide you. He's the one that heals me when I'm sick, and he is the one who will cause me to die and bring me back to life. And he is the one who I will hope will forgive my flaws on the day of judgment. So he's understanding and explaining to people, all these things you're looking at are limited. Whether it be another human, whether it be another God, they're all limited. And this is the real attribute of a creator. And it's only what can guide me and give me guidance. And he's living it. And this is the real manifestation of Tawheed. Now, something I was learning, I went to a bit of a Aqidah class, right? So, you know, like you have the word run, but the doing thing is running. It's called a verbal gerund, right? Tawheed is almost like the believing. It's the actual manifesting the belief. It's the understanding. It's that linkage of Allah provides. So why should I fear losing money and then going to a haram job? Then understand Allah is the creator. He will provide me and I'll get the same sustenance no matter what happens. It's the doing aspect of it. And this is what Ibrahim alayhi salam is really emblematic of.
SubhanAllah. So really, to be honest with you, what you're saying is that, you know, if someone is a Muslim, however, in their behavior, in their actions, they do everything which is contrary to Islam, they will deal in haram stuff and they will, you know, do everything which is not right, then fundamentally there's an issue with Tawheed there, because it's the manifestation of that belief. There's a problem here now, because it's not just Tawheed is there's one creator. It's more than that.
It's that relationship. It's the relationship of understanding and what happens in your actions and your behaviors to others. And this is very, very important to understand. And now at one point, he got sick of their malpractice because, you know, he's going out, he's a young man, he's full of energy, you know, you're younger, you got energy. So he tried to create, you know, explain it to them again, you know, the wisdom and the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they still stuck to idolatry. And he said to his father, what are these statues to which you are so devoted? And again, he said, we found our forefathers worshipping them. And he said, indeed, you and your forefathers have been clearly astray. They've gone on the wrong path. It's evident because I can explain it. And they turned around and said to him, have you come to us with the truth, or is this a joke? Who are you, this young guy? What have you got to know, and how can you benefit us? Even though rationally he's explained it to them and they can't respond.
And subhanAllah, you know, just on that point, because everything you're saying really, it triggers off on something which you can see in today's time, where, you know, that even within, like, unfortunately, within the Muslims, sometimes there's this kind of attitude that, you know, you just follow the people who are elder because they've been studying for, like, you know, you haven't studied for 20, 30, 40 years and all that. No disrespect for them and their education and what they learned. However, it's like kind of like looked down upon that you're someone who's young, you know, why would we take your word over someone who has been doing something for, you know, 50, 60 years? One example would be where someone says, you know, yeah, you can get a mortgage. I've heard this. And you say, obviously you can't, it's got interest. So what do you know? Maulvi Sahib said this, you know, who are you compared? Yeah, Maulvi Sahib has been studying, you know, for 50 years in Islam. What do you know?
Yeah.
So it's not so much about, even though they know themselves, interest is not allowed. But it's not so much about using your own, like, sort of intellect to think, actually, this is not allowed. How can it be allowed? Because so-and-so said it, it must be all right because they got that experience. And who are you to bring something which is in contradiction to what he's saying? You get me? You see that today?
You know what's so interesting? Oh, sorry, you were going to say something.
No, it's Karen. Sorry.
What's so interesting, at one point, Ibrahim alayhi salam says to his father, you know, he says to his father, I have been granted knowledge. I've been given this knowledge. And going back to your example, sometimes you might hear ayat of Quran, you know, interest is haram, this, that, the other. So when you go to this Maulvi or whatever, and you say it's interest is haram, it's clear cut in the Quran. I've got this knowledge. It's clear, it's manifest, it's black and white. Who am I meant to adopt? What the Quran says or the Maulvi? And that's where the relationship is wrong. Because we cannot have that knowledge. And the point is, the differentiator shouldn't be how long you've been studying. It should be the knowledge and where it came from.
You know, the point I was going to quickly make is it's a good thing, really, because, like you say, even in today's society, some of the reasons people have left, like Christianity and other religions and stuff, is that you do get there is an element of it because of the kind of scientific age we live in. There is more of a questioning of things, which is a good thing. You know, like people who have even become atheists, that's at least initially they're questioning. Is the fact that they haven't found the answer, which is the problem, not the fact that they're questioning. The fact that questioning is a good thing. You know, the questioning means that just because your dad's a Christian or just because your dad's a Hindu or whatever, the fact that you're questioning and then you became an atheist, it's still that you've questioned that the premise of what was falsehood in the first place. The issue, like I say, is that if you had a correct society, you had an Islamic society, you had people that you could go to, and Islam was manifest, and people could go and get the answers to those questions, and people obviously do. That's why you get people becoming Muslim. Then you're heading in the right direction. So I think what actually another factor of what you're saying is that that journey, you need someone there to actually guide you to the right path. Because as a human being, it's easy to just follow your forefathers. It's easy just to go, what the people previously did, I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to think about it. But we've got that ability to think, which is innate in us. So I think current times is good in a way because more people are questioning. But the problem is there's so much falsehood and facade, and there's so much bad going on in the world. It's easy to get dragged in that direction more than there being some kind of a proper guidance and a proper something to move into the right direction. So I do see that I think that's a good point.
No, absolutely. And I'll have to go back to the story, otherwise we're going to keep
Go on,
to talk about it. It's so much. But yeah, so basically Ibrahim alayhi salam, after a point, he said, he needs to do something about the state of belief, but didn't reveal it, because at the end of the day, you keep going trying to deal with this, and you're going against a brick wall. But he knew that there's going to be a bit of a celebration on the bank of the river with these people, and it's going to be attended by everyone, right? Everyone's going to be there. Nobody's going to be around at home. So he said, I'm sick of this. So they understood he was sick, like physically sick. He's ill, but he actually meant, I'm sick of like this situation with you guys constantly believing this nonsense, right? Anyway, so when the people went out, he said to himself, then when he was all on his own, by Allah, I will surely plot against your idols after you turned your backs and gone away. So they've gone out, so he's going to do something now. But it's not just a random act of vandalism, right? He's going to make them think and reflect. Okay, now it's an abstract thing. I'm just talking to you. Why don't I show you a physical manifestation, right? So he got a sharp axe, and he went and destroyed all the idols. Now, one thing I was going to say is, so the way it worked with these idols is so there were people who were rich and poor in society, like all societies. So what they would have is the rich people would buy the bigger idols, and the normal people would buy small idols. And occasionally there's normal people would borrow bigger idols, because allegedly the bigger idols were more potent. So you'd get like more sort of reward if you had access to a bigger idol. So there were both small and large idols. So he went and he sarcastically said to the idols, what is wrong with you that you cannot speak? And then he smashed them into pieces except the biggest of them, so they might turn to it for answers. So he's going to make them reflect. If they can really do what you can say, I'm going to destroy them. Put the axe. So he put the axe on the idol and say that, are they going to come to the conclusion that it was idol that did it, or what? So anyway, they come back from this party on the riverbank, and they protested. Who dared do this to our gods? It must be an evildoer. Who could have done this? So immediately they're proving the limitation of their gods, because it has to be some external things. So they know in reality. And what they said is, we heard a young man called Ibrahim speaking ill of them. There's two things here, right? First, he's very, very young, right? So they're identifying him as a young man, but also called Ibrahim. They don't even know him in society, so he doesn't have a big position, yet he is reacting to his beliefs. And that's what's guiding, that is what's guiding him and making him take these actions out. And they said, bring him in front of the eyes of the people so that we may witness his trials. They want to take actions. So what we can see is there's been this discussion, there's been talks, and now it's turned into the physical realm. They can't deal with him. They can't deal with the challenge and the belief. So what do? They take it to the physical aspect. They're going to trial him, and they're going to hurt him, basically. Where is it?
But even Ishi, the here what we're seeing is, like the notion of blind faith, the notion of sometimes you get these non-Muslims who actually they don't have much knowledge about Islam, and to them they actually put Islam in the same category as other religions, where you just believe like blindly or take what your parents told you. However, here, I mean, I know all the Quran is filled with ayats where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is appealing to man's intellect. But the stories that we've just gone through at the moment, it's all rational. Yeah, everything. There's no blind belief in it whatsoever. As Muslims, we don't have a notion of open your heart and let Jesus in. And it's not all based on a feeling. It's all based on rational arguments. And how many Muslims know that? And that's the unfortunate thing.
If we all know each other, and Islam entered a different sort of like the personal reflection of Islam after 9/11. It changed because we had to look at who our identity is, right? But look what's happened nowadays. It's Quran burning, then it's like they oppress women, this, that, the other, right? But how many actually have challenged the ideas of Islam? How many of these Quran burners have actually been able to disprove Allah, that the messenger wasn't the messenger, this, that, the other, all these allegations? But what intellectual discussion there has been?
There's
There is none, is there? They go and burn the Quran as though it's going to humiliate them, but it's going to be a testimony on the hellfire for them on the day of judgment.
I'm glad you mentioned, I know you mentioned very briefly 9/11, because the more I listen to people, be it reverts, convert, be it Muslims that became more active, I swear I hear every single time people say, oh, I looked into Islam after 9/11. I thought about my own Islam, like you said, your identity. I looked in, even Muslims said, I researched more about Islam when 9/11. SubhanAllah, it just blows my mind still that something that they did themselves in order to attack the Muslim lands is the reason for, or is a contributing factor to so many people embracing Islam, looking into more Islam, Muslims becoming more of their Islam, and all of those things. And I know many, many people suffered because of it, and that's on them. That's not on us. But subhanAllah, the amount of people that transformed because of an action they did against Muslims and against Islam, I still find it quite amazing, really.
Bro, you might remember brother Muttaki, Islamic History podcast.
Yeah.
When I did the first podcast, when I recorded the first podcast with him about why is Islamic history important, and the reason why he started looking into Islamic history is after 9/11, all the accusations against Islam. He did that in order to defend Islam.
Yeah, you hear it all the time. Even like recently, there's been quite a few podcasts of people who have become Muslim and stuff. And even though they've become Muslim recently, most of them, quite a few of them, started looking into Islam after 9/11, and you just think, subhanAllah, it's amazing.
But the most important thing is, where's this intellectual challenge? There is none, because they cannot deal with what Islam says.
And I think that's the point you're making here, Ishi, isn't it? Because now that all the idols have been broken, and they don't believe the fact that the big idol has broken the smaller idols because, well, he can't even move. Yeah. So I think what the point you're making is that rather than them now trying to deal with Ibrahim and Islam's arguments rationally, they're going on a physical level.
Exactly.
I think that's what we see today. Yeah.
And they're putting him on this trial, just like Muslims are often on a trial on the media. There's just a trial. It's a witch hunt, right? A migrants bad until proven non-Muslim nowadays. That's the way it works, isn't it?
Yeah, subhanAllah, that's so true, bro.
So, yeah. And so anyway, he rebuked them, and essentially what they decided to do, they put him on this ridiculous trial, and they decided to burn him alive, believe it or not, right? So what they decided to do is they created this trench. So they dug out a trench and they filled it with firewood. Some say they even built catapults. That it was such a high sort of like building, they were catapulting the timber in, and they set fire to this. Now this blaze is enormous, right? Some of them mufassirs say that birds would get burnt if they flew over them. And so they ended up having to catapult Ibrahim alayhi salam into this fire. Now, what did we say about Ibrahim alayhi salam? We said he understands the clear concept of Tawheed, that Allah is the one who gives everything its attributes. He is the creator, right? Ibrahim alayhi salam understand it is not the fire that burns, but it's Allah that makes the fire burn. It is Allah that put the attribute of burning in that fire, right? And it's Allah who can take it away. So they put him in. Now, an interesting fact, there's two opinions. Everyone says that he was, shackled, like he was put in chains. But some say he was undressed as a further humiliation. So he's in his society. Everyone he knows, everyone he's grown up with can see him. They strip him. Some say he was burnt, that came off in the fire, right? And I'll come back to this in a minute because this is a fairly important point. So they launched this catapult, and whilst he's in the air, they say Jibreel alayhi salam came, and he said to him, "Do you need some help?" And Ibrahim alayhi salam, he understands what Allah can do. He's the one that burns, and he said, "No, not from you," because he understands Allah is the one that puts the attribute in the fire. So remember what we said: it's the manifestation of your beliefs. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took the attribute of the fire off, and he said it's the coolest place. He actually stayed in the fire because it was so cool.
SubhanAllah, man. You know, just a quick point, Ishi. Yeah, I've never really thought about this. Obviously, they want to punish Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? They could have just, it's a one teenager, young man, whatever. The fact that they built such a huge fire, they didn't have to do that. But the fact that they did that, I guess from their point of view, was an element of propaganda. It was a show. It was a really big, if you go against our way of life, then this is what's going to happen to you. Bro, how's that any different to what we see today in regards to the constant bombardment of Islam, of what it is, of Muslims and stuff like this, where it's just, and here we're talking about a nation or the Ummah who doesn't even have a state that represents it, doesn't even have here you're talking about people. So what we're seeing superpowers of the world, or superpower because that's what you want, but other big strong nations who are using all their might against a stateless people, right? And here you see this whole village of idol worshippers, right, showing their might against one young man. Really, they didn't have to build such a big fire. It was just some of that I wanted to share. It just actually came to our mind now. Like, they went to such a great, great deal of building this, digging these trenches and building this fire. It was obviously it was propaganda, and it was to show.
It was show. If they wanted to, they could have built a small fire and still burn him. A fire would burn, from their point of view. But it definitely was a show. That's a good point. I never thought of it that way either.
Well, think about this, right? The war on terror, which is really the war on Islam, right? How much millions has it cost? Billions, sorry, right?
Billions.
Maybe even trillions.
Billions,
no, maybe trillions.
Billions, right? It's even put them in debt. It's increased their debt. But why is it? To destroy Islam. And at the end, people are coming to Islam, right? It's just the same thing. It happens. And this is why they say, the stories, right? It's not the fact that these particular stories, they keep repeating. In Islam, these things keep repeating, and that's the way we have to see them, and that's how we have to protect ourselves. So there's an important lesson in this, because it's not just a story we're reflecting on and bringing it to life.
You can even, it gives a good example of, like the fact that they did it for show, such a big thing, that's going to attract people. So then for it to counter on them also highlights, it exposes them, isn't it? In the same way as, like you say, the way that we see it today, the more they do these grand schemes against Islam, and then when it backfires, subhanAllah, more people are affected by that backfiring, isn't it? SubhanAllah. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, until you reflect on these things, you don't really realize.
Yeah, absolutely. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we ordered, "O fire, be cool and safe for Ibrahim." And they say that it was so cool, it was like he was in the middle of a garden, relaxed, chilling, right? Effectively, that's what we would say, right? but the thing is, right? Can you imagine the people, they saw this and they were like, what's going on here? He should have been burned. This is the biggest fire. We can't even get close to it. And he's coming out of this. This is unreal, right? And their faces were black with the smoke and all that kind of stuff, whereas Ibrahim is bright with light and with the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it did cause a problem, and they sought, and Allah says they sought to harm him, but we made him the worst of losers because they saw their failure. Now, interestingly, right, I said that he was naked at one point and he was in front of all his family. Now, Ibrahim alayhi salam was granted a great honor. On the day of judgment, it's said that everybody's going to be naked, but we're going to be in such a panic and under such stress, right? We're not even going to realize we're naked. and the first person to be clothed is Ibrahim alayhi salam, amongst every man, woman, child, to honor him because of what he has to face. So everyone was clothed on that day and he was naked. Whereas when on the day of judgment, everyone born, right, will be naked and he'll be the only one that will be clothed for a moment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards this small action, right? I know I'm quite wary of the time, and there was a little story, I know Brother Majid's heard it, about a little bird. And essentially it saw this fire, and it's a hummingbird, right? When I first read it, I imagined it was a stork, and because a stork, its beak can enlarge and it can fill with water, and it realized the situation. So what it did was it went to a water source, took a gulp of water, whatever, like took some water and tried to extinguish the fire. What is a hummingbird? I don't know if you've seen a hummingbird. It's absolutely tiny, right? The what's it going to do? 2-3 drops, but it did everything in its situation, and that's what we should be like. Because the attack on Islam is so numerous, whether it was LGBT agenda, the gender, the attack on Islam. There's so many issues we've got to defend, and we need to do what we can do. So even though we think it's a small reward, it's still mentioned. And this is how we should see, even against this great calamity that is occurring back then and even now. So yeah, so we can see now, actually what you said is it did create a situation, and there a king called Nimrud heard about it, and he made Ibrahim alayhi salam come to him. Now I'm going to go through this very, very quickly, right? But I think there's a very, very important aspect about this, right? So basically Nimrud, he considered himself, so he said he knew there was a god, but he considered himself also a god, right? So he was like a polytheist? But there's many gods. Yeah, polytheist.
Yeah. Oh, he was worse than a polytheist because he thought he was God.
He was God, right? Because he thought so. But wouldn't that make you a polytheist? No, because
it made you worse than a polytheist.
Yeah, because he thinks he's God himself. Yeah,
because he thought he was God himself, and he claimed because he had so much power and so much influence, he mistook strength against power, because power is being able to change things. Like this is only Allah can do creation and life and all this kind of stuff, right? And so it's mentioned that an ayat, are you, O Prophet, is talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is talking to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not aware of the one who argued with Ibrahim alayhi salam about his Lord, because Allah had granted him kingship. So Allah granted him kingship. So he's forgotten who gave him this position. He thinks it's all of his own back, even though he was born to a more man and woman, right? So he was weak at one point, and it was through whatever that he gained this influence, right? So he said, my Lord is the one who has power to give life and cause death. So Allah is talking about the one who gives life. It says in Surah Mulk, Alladhi khalaqal maut wal hayat. He gives life, and he's the one who created death and created life, right? And Ibn Nimrud said, I too have the power to give life and cause death. So he brings these prisoners, these 2 prisoners, and he allows one to live and one to die. And he's saying, look, I can cause people to die. Such a shallow understanding. And the reason why I wanted to bring this about, right? Today, what is the prevalent thought? The science, right? Science can achieve everything. But when it comes to the soul, when it comes to life, can they give life? In fact, everything in science is about observation. Has anyone observed the soul? Yet it is the secret of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In reality, the body, the dead bodies, if they wanted to disprove God, give life to a dead body. You've got all the material there. Forget about making something, just give life.
SubhanAllah, bro, that's a really, really good example where you applied it to today. Because now, why that's a really good example is because now science isn't just seen as something you learn in school. It's basically taken as God. It's taken as a religion. And that's why I can see it's good how you've connected it to the issue of Nimrud, because he believed he was God. So now when people who worship this religion of science, and then you have the prophets of the religion of science, or which are the scholars, and their books that they read, and they take them as revelation. That's what's actually happening. Yeah, it's no different. But the fantastic point you're saying is that, okay, why is it with all this advanced research and all this, you've ended up in different planets and stuff like that, the essence of man, which is the soul, you're clueless about it. You know, is that not a sign?
Absolutely. And I think it's absolutely amazing. It's just so funny, you know, like even in the, you know, I'm planting plants in the garden, right? And I absolutely hate it, just in case anyone wants to start gardening. It's not, it's a lot of hard work. But the point is this, right? It's so funny when I was reflecting on this, I've planted so many seeds. Why is it some that have grown and some haven't? Same conditions, same watering, but Allah grants life where He wants it.
Subhanallah.
It's not me. After I can only be the like almost Zaria is what we would say now, but like the root, right? The means, yeah, for it to occur. But it's only Allah that gives life. And you know, we think we're all powerful, but we forget that sometimes. And it's an absolutely so even in our own lives. And there's an important reason why I mentioned this. So he's realizing Nimrud is thinking so shallow. What are you meant to do with this? But what does he do? He says, Allah is the one who created it. He understands nature. Allah is the one that makes the sun rise from the east to the west. You reverse that and make it go from the west to the east. And obviously you can't, and they say he's dumbfounded. But there's two things, right? What is it about these examples? Everybody can understand them. Every man understands life. Every man, woman, child understands life and death. Because one day someone might be dead, the other, you know, alive. They might be dead.
Don't get it the wrong way around.
So, but the point is this, and you know, everyone can observe the sun. It's very simple, but it's also very clear. And you understand how far have we come? Even though it was thousands of years ago, are we any closer to finding the secret of life? And this is how Islam is. It's simple, clear, and distinct.
Man life famous, bro. Man life.
Exactly. But the point is, look how Ibrahim al-Islam, you know, you think of going to a king, you're going to give the best, like most complicated example, goes to the most simple, and he is dumbfounded. And I love this aspect of Ibrahim, even though they say he's intellectual, he's got the best of judgment, he makes it so everyone is clear. And can you imagine being in that court? Even the poor person will appreciate these examples. Today's science dumbfounds you with all these stuff, yet they're no closer to understanding all these things. And I think that there's some wisdom in this. We've spoken about Haran, but I think we should move to the so there's some little issues, some little things. So
I think due to time and stuff like that, concentrate on the more bigger issues.
Yeah. So I was just going to mention one thing to the migrating, and there was a situation where they were given a slave or servant, sorry, not a slave, a servant called Hajar, who he in later days got married to. Now, by a long time elapses after this, right? And he's 80 years old. Sarah al-Islam suggests that he marries Hajar al-Islam so he can have a child because he has no child. And at the moment, the important thing is there is no believers apart from his nephew Lut al-Islam, Sarah, and Hajar, right? And Ibrahim
just think about it. All the things you're mentioning about, he's 80 now, but people have just not accepted the clear evidences, and we see that today as well.
Absolutely. And he makes dua, you know, oh my Lord, bless me with righteous offspring, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him. And they say Ghulam al-Halim, a forbearing, a patient child, right? And this is Ismail alayhi salam. They call him the father of the Arabs because it's from this lineage Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, and it's of Arabs that came, right? Anyway, at one point, one day Ibrahim alayhi salam woke up and he asked his wife Hajar to get a son and prepare for a long journey. No details. So in a few days, Ibrahim alayhi salam started out with his wife, right? And they walk to Mecca, what we call modern day Mecca. Now, what they say about Ismail alayhi salam, he was still nursing, he's drinking his mother's milk, and he's not been weaned off it. So he's still in that situation. So they could be up to 2 years old. And they walk through cultivated land, you know, all nice land, farmland where there's food, and they end up in this desert, arid, hot place, right? Now, Mecca, if you go now, it's all built up and it's beautiful, right? You could live there. Then it was absolutely harsh, rocky, no building, no standard roads, no food source, no water source. It's literally in the middle of nowhere, right? There's no sign of life. Forget about all these sort of stuff. Nothing, right? And he said he helped his wife and child to dismount, and he left them with a small amount of food and water, which is, they say, it was just enough for 2 days. Ibrahim alayhi salam started to depart, and Hajar, she said, where are you leaving us? Behind in this valley, there's no human, nothing, right? Essentially, there is absolutely nothing. So she's like panicking, what is going on here, right? So she repeated several times, Ibrahim alayhi salam didn't even turn towards her. And she says, has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered you? And he replied, yes. She said, then he will not let us perish. After saying this, she returned and left Ibrahim alayhi salam. So you can see Ibrahim alayhi salam has taught her the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's why her iman, her belief, allows her to accept this difficult situation. So imagine this, right? You're 80 years old, you're an old man, hard to work, hard to travel. You go to a place, forget about Google Maps, there's nothing, there's no roads, there's no reference points, nothing, and you leave your most valuable thing. You know, when a man gets to that age, I imagine the most important thing is leaving a legacy, and often that's your children, and you've been praying for this child, and you leave them because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded. And this truly requires a lot of understanding, because if you think about it, the only thing that can allow you to do that is your understanding that Allah is the one who has said this, and he wants this, and he will provide because he has the means to do so. So he basically, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he kept walking, and he ended up towards like a narrow pass where he couldn't be seen, and then he turned his face to the Kaaba. Now, I don't believe there's a Kaaba there. It's just that sort of land, because that land, as in the land itself, was considered holy, right? He raised his hands in dua and basically made dua. And he said, my Lord, make this city of Mecca secure and keep me and my children away from the worship of idols, right? So what is he making dua? Keep them safe and keep them away from the worship of idols. He's not asking for sustenance. So if you look at what man really needs, right? He needs, when I say man, I mean mankind. He needs food, he needs shelter, he needs clothing, he needs protection. What does Ibrahim alayhi salam? Keep him away from the worship of idols. Keep him away from almost an ideological sense, right? I think when I was in school, in college, they had this thing called Maslow's. There was like a triangle.
Yeah, Maslow's hierarchy,
right? And the top was the self-actualization, where you understand your purpose, you understand your goal, and this is what Ibrahim alayhi salam, keep him away from this, keep him on the path of Tawheed. Can you imagine that? Most of us, when we're struggling in a survival mode, and we call it better, we look for our basic needs. And what does Ibrahim? He calls to this self-actualization. And that's why we call him an honorable prophet, because he understands what honors and dishonors man. Because when you're in that difficulty, you're willing to, compromise. And my Lord, they have caused many people to go astray. So he understands that what the worship of idols and other than Allah does. So whoever follows me is with me, and whoever disobeys, and Allah is saying, so whoever follows me is with me, and whoever disobeys me, then surely you are still all forgiving and merciful. And then he says, oh our Lord, I have settled some of my offspring in a barren land. So he's even describing as barren, because there's no food, no water, nothing, near your sacred house, O Lord, so they may establish prayer. So he's saying, I've left them so they can establish prayer. So make the hearts of the believing people inclined towards them and provide them with fruits, so perhaps they will be thanking. So if you think about that triangle, at the top is this belief. Then there's the security and the socializing, and the basic thing that you need is the fruits, i.e. food, water. And he's almost going on the wrong way down the hierarchy. He's saying, make the belief first, then make people come to him so they can believe, and then so you can socialize, and then you can have protection through people, and then give them food. So he understands that Allah is the one that provides, and it is only the belief that will grant you this, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears this dua and he accepts it. And he accepts it. So what happens? So after a while, Ismail alayhi salam's mother is in this situation. She's feeding a child. It's literally the most valuable thing to them, right? And she's trying the best to protect them. She's a woman. She's got no reference. Can you imagine this, right? I sent you off into a jungle, right? What are you going to try and do? On your way, you're going to have reference points. Oh, on the way we pass this, that, the other. In the middle of the desert where there's no reference, just rocky. You're not used to traveling these situations. There's no food. What are you going to do? And her child is thirsty, and they say he was curling up and crying. She looked at him crying in pain, and as soon as she saw it, she couldn't, she's dying of thirst effectively, right? So she left him there, and she sort of made him lie, like she wrapped him in blankets and stuff, so he's sort of protected from the weather. And then she went up Safa. She went up to a hill or a mountain that we were now called Safa, the closest thing to her, so she could see a vantage point. So if she could see anyone nearby, because she needs help at this moment, what is she going to do? And then she climbs the Marwa, and she's making dua as well while she does it. And she does it on the 7th time of Marwa, right? So she runs up Safa, doesn't see anything. So she goes to she sees another hill. So she thinks, I'll get another vantage point. So she runs to it. So she goes down the mountain, runs, and then goes to the top of this mountain called Marwa, right? Looks again, don't see. So she keeps doing this. On the 7th time, she hears a voice. So she says to herself, Saf, be quiet. She's trying to like settle her mind. She's in a panic mode, right? And then she sees someone next to the baby. And it's the angel Jibreel alayhi salam with the tip of his wing. He's creating. There's a water source. He's creating this spring. And she's literally, she's receiving the rizq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided this, right? And she runs to this well, and she's basically makes it into like a bowl, and she's trying to control the water source. And she's saying, Zam, Zam, stop, 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 right? She's trying to control the situation so she could feed her baby and drink water herself. And they say that if she hadn't stopped it, it would have become a stream. She never lost hope, but at the same time, she ran and looked for people to help. And this is what we should do. Because as we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We have that understanding, but we've got to take the actions as well. And she exhausted herself, and now she ended up with a water source. So I think, and this is part of the Hajj, what do you want to call them? Actions, rituals. And this is what we're meant to think about. This is the sacrifice that this woman had to go, and we all enact it, right? There's that connection. Anyway,
I think it's as I said before, time's of the essence. So what I'd suggest is, I know there's quite a bit more to come. Alhamdulillah, amazing stuff. No, it's not. No worries about that. But I guess the pinnacle of normally the story of Ibrahim in Islam is what you're coming to, which is the sacrifice, the qurbani and stuff. So I'd love to hear more about that, inshallah. So if we can fast forward to that, that'd be great.
Okay. Absolutely. Just one moment. So basically, it says in the Quran, when Ismail alayhi salam was of an age where he's able to walk and take responsibility for himself, Ibrahim alayhi salam, what he would do is occasionally visit. Now, he saw a dream that he's sacrificing, slaughtering his own son. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ said the dreams of the Anbiya of revelation, they're wahi, right? Now, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he understands this is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he has to go do it. And it's obviously a very difficult situation. He's very old. His son is his legacy. It's what the legacy of the believers, and he's going to have to do it. And it's a very, very difficult situation. But he's going to do it because he's an Anbiya. He understands Allah is the creator. He's the one that gave him his son. So he hastened to be obedient. So he said to his son, and so rather than panicking and doing it on the sly, he walks up to his son and says, oh, my dear son, I've seen in a dream that I must sacrifice you. So tell me what you think, he replied. Oh, my dear father, So Ismail alayhi salam responds, oh, my dear father, do as you are commanded. Allah willing, you will find me steadfast. Just think about this, right? You're talking about to your son, you're having a rational conversation, a calm, collected conversation. I've got to sacrifice you. I've got to take your life. not in a war situation, not in a disease, like he's got a disease that, you know, we've got to end, you know, there's nothing we can do for you. He's got to calm, collectively take the life of his own son that he's got in such an old age, right? And the son responds, you've got to do what you've been commanding. And inshallah, you will find me of the Sabrin, the one who are steadfast, the ones who persevere. So he's asking Allah to give him that patience. So you can see both of these are honorable. They're not doing it on the sly. He's talking to his son. He's dealing with the matter head on. And the son, from his own belief, is asking for Allah for the patience to allow his father to do this.
Also, Ismail Islam, he's young at this stage. But obviously, you know, he's part of the Anbiya as well. So maybe he knows that this is wahi. Otherwise, you know, normally you'd say, well, you know, it's just a dream. You know, come on, you know, we dream about all sorts of stuff. But the fact that he, you know, his response wasn't that, it was he understood that this was a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you know, he was more than willing to go ahead with it.
Well, of course, this isn't a response of, you know, like now if you ask even the kids now of nowadays, ask them to do anything and you're like, why should I do it? Can't you do it? Haven't you got a pair of hands or a pair of legs, right? But this is someone who understands. They're not doing it out of resignation. They're doing it out of pure obedience and understanding and certainty that is Allah is saying it, and his father is an Anbiya and he himself is an Anbiya. So yeah, you're absolutely correct.
Bro, nowadays, I mean, just kind of crude example is, you know, if you were to just to say to your child, you know, I had a dream that you're going to marry this particular person, you know, let's go over and ask for the rishta and all that, you know, they would say, what kind of nonsense is this, right? You know, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's not somewhere you're going to go off anyway. It's a dream. However, here you're talking about being sacrificed. It's just, you know what it is they were human as well. I think I know they were prophets, but they were humans, and I think that's what people don't understand, that they just think they were like robots and they reacted in the same way. They were humans. They had the emotions. They had the same survival instinct and everything, which is a part of a human being. However, their response seems like beyond human. Do you know what I mean? But that's obviously just made them the people and the Anbiya they were.
Think about this, right? You know, he's already been put in a trial where he's had to leave them, and now he's been asked to sacrifice them. And after he's been praying, these are all his, you know, you got to understand, Ismail doesn't just represent just the son. These are all his hopes, ambitions, his legacy. That's going to be the future of the believers, because after him and Sarah, and he doesn't know what's going on with Lut al-Islam, right? This is the only believer after them. So it's a much bigger, it's unreal, the stakes, and he's still, and I cannot imagine the situation, but the trials of the Anbiya are unreal. And look at what Ismail says. He even asked Allah to give him tawfiq, you know, the ability or the opportunity to achieve success. Inshallah, you will find me one of those who perseveres, who will be of the patient. Can you just imagine the situation? It's unreal. So yeah, absolutely, they were human, and they understood the situation, but they also understood this is the command of Allah, and this is the way it has to be. But yeah, sorry, moving on.
But actually, don't want I know time's ticking. And one quick point, I'm just thinking, like, you know, we're trying to almost make it like you can't imagine it, or it's kind of like beyond human capability. But if you think about when you see on video where there's, whether it's a mother in Palestine or Kashmir or whatever, and they're saying, you know, my son's become a martyr. If I had 10 more sons, then I'd be more than happy for them to sacrifice in this path. Isn't that's kind of similar?
You know this, that attack that happened. You know what I was thinking, right? You know, if I was in that situation, my mum would be like, "Don't go, right? Don't go. You're gonna get hurt, right?" You know what happens every year. You know what we saw? We saw those mothers in the mosque with them.
That's the point. That's what I'm saying. So that
they're, you know, in the mosque.
It's happening. It's happening today.
Of course, and it's a scary thought, and we think we're safe in our situation. That's the scary thing. If Allah wants to put in that situation, it could turn around like that.
It's also a reason why, you know, luxuries and wealth and comfort and all of these can be obstacles. They can be major obstacles, because those people, sometimes they feel like they have nothing to lose. When you have nothing to lose, you know, there's an element of, and you're going through it, there's an element of, you know what, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. If I sacrifice, if I embrace the trial, embracing a trial, embracing a test means I'm going to receive a rank that is high. Whereas we think a lot of our dunya things, we think, oh, okay, oh, what if I lose my house? What if I lose my car, my children, my family, my comfortable setting that we're living in? There's no, potential for war and bombs and stuff like that. So we think there's so much to lose by potentially all of those things that we've been given. But that same thing is what makes us fear trials and tribulations and challenges. So it just goes to prove that's why, the people who have less sometimes are more fortunate, and we have so much, and we can turn them into the thing that will keep us away from Jannah if we don't deal with things properly. And it's scary because it's not easy to go, I want trials. Nobody wants to go, I want to go through that. No one will put themselves intentionally into those situations. But knowing that the people are in those situations are the ones that will be rewarded the most, there's part of you that's like, I want to be rewarded. I want to get into Jannah. I want to get a higher rank, but do I want to bring trials on myself? It's hard as a human being. It's hard to be. We're programmed a certain way, isn't it? We don't intentionally throw ourselves into harm's way. So, Subhanallah. Again, no, it's lots of really important lessons. Really, Subhanallah.
And then in the story, it says, "Falamma aslama," they submitted, and not just he submitted; they both submitted, and it implies the difficulty. Am I still on mute?
No.
Okay, so they submitted to Allah's will. They understand this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're both submitting willingly in this difficult situation. And then Ibrahim laid him on the side of his forehead for the sacrifice. So he is going to do it. And they say that he took the knife out and it was literally on the neck, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he doesn't need these sacrifices. He just needs our submission, right? That's what he calls to, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we called out to him, Ibrahim, you have fulfilled the vision. Indeed, this is how we reward the good doers. This was a truly revealing test, and we ransomed his son with a great sacrifice. So what the angel did is we replaced Ismail al-Islam with a ram from Jannah. So he did this sacrifice. So we can see that from his beliefs, he was carrying out this action. He understood that it's Allah that gave him his son, and you can take him away. If Allah has said, this is your, it's for Allah to give the life. He is just the means, like we described before. It's his understanding that allows him to do it, and it's the understanding of the son that allows him to do it. Now, if you think, we've mentioned two stories here, right, of a father and son. Here, both of them are believers, and they both agree to what Allah has said, and they go carry the action out, and they're rewarded. In this instance, it's the ram, but previously we spoke about Ibrahim alayhi salam's father, Azar, right? And Ibrahim alayhi salam is the son in this instant. And the believer, the believer followed what Allah said, and he made them successful. And we see Allah is the one who makes the believers successful. He's always on the side of the believers, and he wants the victories of the believers. So we reward them by choosing for them such a test, directing their minds and hearts to rise to a necessary level. So this is what the sacrifice of Eid al-Adha is about. It's the reminder of what happened, the reality of having that understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and doing what is in accordance with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. Yes, we believe we live in the time of the Ummah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but these concepts carry on. We have our own sacrifices in our day-to-day life. Of course, we have the ritual sacrifice to remind ourselves that this is what we're meant to be doing in our everyday life, sacrificing for the sake of Allah in recognition of what He is and then acting accordingly. And this is why it says Aslama. Think about the word Aslama, Islam, it means submission. Ibrahim alayhi salam gave us the name Muslim, those who submit, right? They submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in recognition of what Allah is, right? And this is what Islam in its simplest form is, essence is, the submission to Allah wholeheartedly and that understanding that goes with it. And that's something that we should aspire to be.
Inshallah.
Do we have enough time for another anecdote?
Entirely up to, obviously, I know Rash is in a bit of...
Sorry, go for it if it's a short one. I do want to make a quick point, but you go first.
You know why? Because this is one of my most favorite stories of the Quran, and it's to do with the victories of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks at some point to Ibrahim alayhi salam to build the Kaaba, right? And I won't go into the details of it, but certain places, stations are made special, like Maqam Ibrahim and the Hajar Aswad, etc. But you know, when Ibrahim alayhi salam, now he's a rational person, and there's this thing where he said, I'm building this, there's not many people, and you're saying all the people are going to come from everywhere. I can't call all the people. But what was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you build it, I will make the call, right? Ibrahim alayhi salam may not have seen what his work achieved. And what I love about that little story is every man, us three are going to be we're going to testify that Allah completed. We are part of the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether we like it or not. And think about this. Allah has said that the believers are going to be victorious. Are we going to be a part of it? Not whether we like it or not. And this is what I love. You know, you think, you know, like you do all these things, but it's Allah that gives us victory and takes away victories. And I love the aspect of we can be part of that victory. And that is what Hajj is, that reflection that this was a dua made by a man. You know, bring these people, make them of the believers, make them of the best of descendants, make them. And this is what it's all about. Allah is with the believers and he wants us to be victorious. And that is a reminder of what all the people on Hajj are going to be doing. They're all going to be doing the rites that were given to Ibrahim alayhi salam, because he asked, show me the rights, show me how to revere you. So sorry, I just kind of love this story. I've gone very quickly into it, but yeah, I just love that as a reminder.
To be fair, my point was linked to that, because I was just going to say at the time, you know, like when those events were occurring, you know, Ibrahim alayhi salam had already proven his devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prior to, you know, the task of, you know, sacrificing his son. You know, even prior to the Kaaba being there. So all of these things, the beauty of I find, and I'm basically what Ishi's saying is, now us sitting in 2023 looking back, all of those things that happened, you know, this part of Allah's grand plan. Allah knew that in the future there's going to be Muslims, the people that are going to go there, there's going to be this inspiring story of sacrifice, this inspiring story of tests and tribulations, you know, seeking Allah's forgiveness, you know. But in order for us to see that, because in our place, we're in a different place in time, so we're looking back at all of things already happening. Those people that it happened upon, there's like one person or two people in the middle of Safa and Marwa. There's one person there on the, you know, there's just him almost sacrificing his son. You know, there's 1, 2, 3 people that this is happening to. And all of these thousands of years later, the plan of like kind of setting up Hajj and all of the rituals and everything, we can see it now. They couldn't see it. All they were doing is making sure they deliver on what Allah is asking them to do. And the same reason, Ishi, I find that beautiful, because you look back and you go, they wouldn't have known that this is what people are going to do in all of these years' time, but it's linked and we're all linked. And that's the beauty of it. SubhanAllah.
I think also, Rash, is it shows as well that in just look at the times we have today, whether it's with social media and everything, people do things, a lot of people do things, unfortunately, because of like, you know, ego and these type of things, right? Vanity and all. We do things to show off, right? We do things to show, you know, we'll do, you know, we want the largest audience we could probably get. But, you know, here you're talking, like you're saying, you're talking about these things are happening where there's a few people, they're not doing it because years later people are going to be talking about them and emulating in those steps. They're doing it at that time because that's the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's what it means to submit.
Well, so few people are doing it, going to be able to do it now. Look, it's cost more than what, 10, 12,000. So I spoke to people this year, they spent over 10 grand to go to Hajj. It's like, it's not even, bro, a lot of people are going to struggle to do it, going forward if it continues to go up. Bro,
to be honest with you, the situation with Hajj today is a podcast within itself. Because
next time,
bro, I'm telling you, I was surprised when I was a couple of weeks ago with some brothers, and they were telling me, and I need to check this out, but I have no reason to doubt them because they're top brothers, right? They were saying now, you have to have like a code or something on your phone or something like that to enter into the haram.
Really? Is it?
You know this? Like, you know, it's bro, it's a theme park. You know how you have a wristband? Like, they're tit, tit, yeah. I'm like, you know, they're changing this worship and making it purely commercialized. But anyway, look, that is, I don't want to lose the essence of
It's
the
a very,
examples
very
that.
important point you make. Actually, Allah refers to this. He says that these stations are a reminder for you. The Safa, Marwa, Zamzam, Maqam Ibrahim, the Kaaba, Hajj al-Aswad, all of these things are a reminder for us of the sacrifices. And it's not just a theme park. It's not a series of rituals. It's that understanding and to elevate us as humans. Because whatever you saw about Ibrahim alayhi salam, he never compromised. He understood his situation. You know, a lot of people, when they think they're in a weaker situation, when they're low in number, they base themselves. They compromise. They go on a lower level. But this is not Ibrahim. He is, you know, Anbiya, and that's why he's an example. He dealt with every single matter.
Yeah, subhanallah, bro. And even I was listening to in the khutbah. I think it was a khutbah like weeks ago, to be honest with you. I was talking about Ibrahim alayhi salam is that one prophet where he's like kind of rated in what you would call the Abrahamic religion, in the sense like, you know, his stature in whether it's with the Yahud, whether it's with the Nasara, the Christians, right? It's, you know, he has that reputation. Obviously we know he's the Khalil of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but yeah, bro, listen, you know what, some of the lessons that you've mentioned, honestly, they're really amazing. And what's brilliant, and I think now hopefully the people listening or watching can understand what you meant when you said a while back, as in the podcast, you said, you know, to bring the Quran to life, because all of these examples that we're talking about, all of these steps of the steps of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and even it's even like gonna be the other prophets as well, like Lut alayhi salam, definitely in these days, right? But it's like every single one of them, they're not stories. These are not just stories. They're not just something you read to the kids at night to put them to bed. They are real implications. They had the same implications they had then, they have it today. And that's the amazing thing. And first and foremost, from what my understanding is, that a lot of the stories of the Anbiya were first and foremost for the Prophet himself, right? For his mission, what he was going through. Look at the Anbiya before you, and then to the Ummah. And it's really good point you made at the beginning, was that, you know, the Quran, you know, it's you know, it's not a huge message, right? In the sense, like, you know, it's a book, yeah. It has 30 spade and whatnot, but a lot of in the Quran is about the previous prophets. So it wasn't just pastime. It wasn't like, okay, whilst, you know, interesting revelation comes, let me just tell you about these prophets. No, all of these things are there and they're important, and we can take inspiration. Obviously, we're talking about the Sharia. From the Sharia point of view, and I want to make this point as well, that we do the Qurbani and stuff like this because this is the Sharia of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We don't do it only because Ibrahim. We do it because the Prophet told us that we should do it, even though the reason would link back to Ibrahim alayhi salam. So we don't follow the Sharias of the previous prophets. However, their tests, their tribulations, the way they went about their business, these are things that, you know, inspires. They should inspire us, and things that we can kind of learn from. So guys, I'm gonna just take your final thoughts if you have any. I mean, there's a lot's been discussed. So Rash, I'll start off with you, bro.
I'm not going to add too much. I know we've been speaking for a while now. I'm just going to say that just as a reminder to myself first, in that we are still in those first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. I think in the West, the sad thing is, because life as normal, your school, your college, your work and stuff, we don't give these 10 days the real dedication that they deserve. Remember, we can get as much reward in these 10 days as we can get in Ramadan. You know, so we need to make the most of it. I mentioned it in my khutbah yesterday, you know, that we should make an effort to do good deeds in this time, you know, and there's only a few more days. And then there's obviously the day of Arafah coming, you know, to fast and to do all of those things. So I know it's not linked to the topic, but I just think if we should make the most of it. And part of that is teach our children what, you know, what Ishti's been saying today, and teach them how they can apply it in their lives. Because yes, okay, sometimes we teach it like a story, but bring it to life, tell them how they can apply it in their lives. And, you know, they're learning so many other things in school, then, you know, if they don't embrace these kind of ideas, then it will just become, you know, it will be just something that they heard long time ago, and that's it. So, and we need to make more of an effort. I think generally it's hard, but yeah, I think that's the main thing. And yeah, there's abundant rewards in these 10 days. So inshallah, we should try our best.
No, Jazakallah for that. I know what you mean, because it's like trying to get the kids motivated.
Well, imagine we were in a Muslim country, like Ramadan would be a holiday. I bet these 10 days,
Not so sure, bro.
it would be a holiday. There would be stuff on TV. There would, if they had school, this is what they've been being taught at school. Everything that issue, you know, we had an hour or so on this. They'd be teaching this all week in school. They would delve into the detail with the children and these examples, and our children would know them off by heart. We'd know them off by heart if we went through school learning this every year, every kind of Dhul Hijjah. Yeah. But sadly, that's not the situation many of us are in. So we need to make that extra concerted effort to make sure our children embrace it, so that they don't come to it too late and forget about it.
No, definitely, bro. Definitely. Jazakallah for the advice. Ishi, what are you saying, bro? Is there anything you wanna, no more stories, but if you wanna add anything at the end?
Just one more anecdote, bro. No, I think absolutely I second what Rash has said. And you know, it's going to be Eid soon, so Eid Mubarak in advance. And I think, you know, the most important thing is that message of Tawheed, and bringing it to life in every day, every small, whether it's small or large ways, and understanding that these actions are more than rituals, and understanding the concepts, ideas about, because that is what we're meant to do. The Quran was given to elevate, better ourselves. And that's how we bring the Quran to life and keep the message of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam alive.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. I just had a thought that, you know, you look at the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? And some of the main challenges then, and the challenges you could argue today, are, you know, the spread of atheism and Scientology and science and stuff like that, and also the push of LGBT and stuff like that. And you think about the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was dealing with kufr with rational arguments. Also, Lut alayhi salam was doing his thing as well. So just a comparison that you know, the struggle hasn't kind of changed. The same things we've seen and repeat. But what's going to count is how we react, and hopefully on the day of judgment, that can tip the scales, inshallah, in our favor. But guys, jazakallah khair for a, you know, for the comeback podcast. It was a blockbuster. It was really good, and I feel that I've kind of cut Ishti short. But you know, I think the one last piece of advice I'd give to all the listeners is Ishi just sort of touched the surface here. As Rash is saying as well, these things can be taught in school. These things can be read in depth. So go out, read, learn about the Ibrahim alayhi salam, you know, and then teach it to your children, teach it to other people around you. You know, we need to know about these amazing people, these you know, the Khalilullah of Allah, and in order to kind of see what does it mean to be a Muslim, what does it mean to submit, what does it mean to, you know, not compromise. And obviously we have the seerah, which obviously fulfills all of these things. However, as she said at the beginning, and I'll second that these stories aren't there as pastime in the Quran. They're there for us to learn, to read, and to take inspiration from. And inshallah ta'ala, you know, try to implement it, try to incorporate it within our lives. But yeah, so jazakallah brothers, and hopefully this podcast, you know, will benefit those listening, those watching. I've certainly benefited from both of you. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you both, reward us all in the, you know, the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. And inshallah, if we make it to Eid, then early Eid Mubarak. So on that note, brothers, inshallah ta'ala, until the next one, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.